For the longest time, the world of databases was just stuck. It was locked in this huge conflict, forcing developers to make a really, really tough choice. But then, a new class of technology came along to solve this problem, promising the best of both worlds. So today, we're going to dive into what broke that stalemate: NewSQL. And really, it all came down to this one simple, but man, incredibly tough question. For what felt like forever, the answer was just, you can't have both. You either built a system that could handle massive, massive scale, or you built one that was perfectly consistent and reliable. Getting both, yeah, that was the holy grail.
All right, so let's really dig into that choice, right? To get why NewSQL was so revolutionary, we've got to first understand this huge dilemma that basically defined an entire era of software development back in the early 2010s. And here it is. This is that painful trade-off, laid out right in front of us. On one side, you had your traditional relational databases. They gave you what are called ACID guarantees, which is basically a rock-solid promise that your data is safe and sound. The problem? Trying to scale them up to handle huge amounts of traffic was a total nightmare. Then you had the other camp, NoSQL. These things could scale like crazy. You need more power? Just throw more machines at it. Easy. But, and this is a big but, you had to give up some of that super strict consistency to get all that speed and flexibility.
So this frustrating choice, it just defined everything for years. And then Google stepped in. One of the biggest players in the game decided to tackle this head-on, and it completely changed the story. Okay, so picture this. It's 2012. Google, a company that operates on a scale that's kind of hard to even wrap your head around, drops this paper. And it sends absolute shockwaves through the entire industry. Why? Because they'd built something that pretty much everyone thought was impossible. They called it Spanner, and let me tell you, this was the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for. It was the first of its kind, a database that was distributed across the globe, that could speak SQL, that could scale across the entire planet. And this is the kicker, it still gave you those full, uncompromised ACID guarantees you'd get from a classic relational database. It was proof that you didn't have to choose anymore. Spanner's impact was, well, it was huge, and it was immediate. See, this wasn't just about solving a problem for Google. This kicked off an entire movement. After that 2012 paper, a whole wave of new open-source projects popped up, all inspired by what Spanner had done. And that evolution, well, that's what led us to the mature ecosystem of what we call NewSQL, or sometimes distributed SQL, that we have today. So yeah, Spanner was the spark that lit the fire. So let's meet some of the stars that came out of this new world, the key players who took those core ideas and just ran with them.
I absolutely love this quote. I think it just perfectly nails the whole spirit of this movement. Think about it. NoSQL came along and just broke the mold, right? It shattered the old way of thinking. But then NewSQL came along, picked up the best pieces, all that scale and resilience, and rebuilt the mold. But this time with the reliability and the language we already knew and loved, SQL.
All right, here's a quick rundown of some of the big names in the space. First up, CockroachDB. And yeah, with a name like that, you can guess its main feature. It's incredibly resilient, almost impossible to kill. It's built for geodistribution, and it's compatible with Postgre, which is a huge plus. Then you've got TDB. It's really cool because it can handle both super fast transactions and heavy-duty analytical queries, kind of a hybrid. And it speaks MySQL. And finally, there's VoltDB. Its whole game is about pure, unadulterated speed. It does this by operating completely in memory, which makes it perfect for those high-throughput OLTP, that's online transaction processing apps. Okay, so how does this magic trick actually work? I mean, how do these databases really deliver on such a massive promise? Let's pop the hood for a minute and see what makes these things tick. So the secret sauce really comes down to three key things. First, at the very core, you have something called distributed consensus. They use these protocols, you might have heard of them, like Raft or Paxos. The easiest way to think about it is like a super sophisticated voting system where all the different computers in the network have to agree on every single change. That's how they guarantee consistency, no matter what. Second, they handle data distribution automatically. They use techniques called sharding and replication, which is really just a fancy way of saying they smartly chop up your data and make copies of it across a ton of different machines. This gives you both scale and resilience if something goes wrong. And last but not least, these databases are what we call cloud native. They were built from the ground up to live and breathe in modern cloud environments, like running on Kubernetes.
But all this tech is only as good as the problems it actually solves, right? So where do you actually see NewSQL out there in the wild? Let's connect this back to the real world.
And this is really where the rubber meets the road. NewSQL really shines in those high-stakes applications where you just can't afford to compromise on anything. I'm talking financial systems, where you need perfect accuracy but also have to serve millions of people. Or think about a global SaaS platform that needs to feel fast for users in Tokyo and users in New York. NewSQL makes it possible to build these incredibly available, multi-region apps without ever having to give up those strong guarantees or the familiar comfort of SQL.
Which brings us to a final, really interesting thought. For decades, the story of databases was a story of trade-offs. You get this, but you give up that. NewSQL feels like it finally resolved the biggest trade-off of them all. So, with the power of both worlds in our hands, it begs the question, is this it? Is NewSQL the final chapter in the database story? Or is there another massive revolution waiting just around the corner? It's a powerful idea to think about, especially as data just continues to completely reshape our world.